Thank you so much. Really excited to be here today. And I hope while I'm here I get to learn a little bit more about Crowder College. It sounds like an incredible community you all have here. And I really appreciate the invitation from Chet to be with you all today. Let's see if we get this. So, thank you for the introduction. I'm Executive Director of Engage NWA, Margot Lemaster. And with the work we're doing, we really recognize that we must be inclusive across all sectors, at all levels, and communities to be able to grow and thrive as a region. So we really aim to do this by serving as a connector, a convener, and a facilitator for all efforts in the region around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We were started in 2013, actually, with a partnership between the Jones Trust and the Northwest Arkansas Council. And it was in 2017 that the council commissioned a regional strategic plan for diversity and inclusion. I want to give you a little bit of background about the council because it kind of lets you know why are they now we're under the umbrella of the council, and why is that? So the council was actually founded in 1990 by some regional business leaders, Sam Walton, John and Don Tyson, J.B. Hunt, Mark Simmons, and others, who really said we've got to come together to address regional challenges. Back at that time, it was the airport was a big deal, and now we have our regional airport. And there's been other physical infrastructure projects like that, highways, water quality, et cetera. And more recently, it's become kind of more focused on social infrastructure. So that's where my work comes in. And I think, so I'm curious to learn more about your community here, but I think that we've got some similarities, and really that our communities have changed dramatically over the last few years and decades. And that's, for us, that's really increased the need for us to be proactive in creating inclusive and equitable communities if we want to continue to be a great place to live and work. So I just want to highlight a few things that I think make Engage stand apart maybe from other similar efforts. And that's really that we are working to try to get those engaged who maybe haven't been involved in the past. We really want to open the door for more people to be able to participate. And I think one way that we can do this is by having the council really as the messenger. And we're really leading with a frame of economic prosperity and how everyone benefits from this work. And it's crucial that we have people in decision-making positions that are part of this effort, because we've got to have that buy-in from the top in order to see true change happen. And another thing that we've really been careful about is really trying to stay away from partisan or a politicized frame, because that doesn't get us anywhere. We really want to focus on what are the things that we have in common, what are our shared values. And there's plenty of research that tells us that diverse and inclusive communities perform better economically, going back to that economic prosperity frame, and that the regions that really embrace this are the ones that will thrive. So going back to this PowerPoint, I've got a few things on the right-hand side that show that just since we started the strategic planning process and getting everybody together to really identify what are the shared goals that we have as a region in this space, some great things have happened. Chet already shared a little bit of that in my introduction, but I'll go into that a little bit later as well. So just to give you a little bit of a background in terms of the demographic change that we've experienced over the last few decades in Northwest Arkansas, and it sounds like it's similar here in Southwest Missouri. In general, we've just had rapid growth. So now we're a little bit over 550,000 residents, and we're one of the fastest growing metropolitan statistic areas in the country. We're netting about 33 new people a day. So when you consider people moving to the area, deaths, births, people moving away, we're still netting about 33 new people. And over half of our population comes from outside of the state of Arkansas. So looking at this, these pie charts here, you can see that back in 1990, we were a pretty homogeneous region. About 96% of our population was white, versus today we're at about 73%. And the estimates show that those numbers are expected to continue to drop. And this is similar to what's happening nationally. And by 2022, we expect to have less than 70% of the people in our region will be white. We also have a pretty significant foreign-born population. It's broken down by community on the right-hand side. they have accounted for a significant portion of our overall population growth. But really, the thing that's driving these numbers, often when we think about rapid demographic change, we think of immigration, but really it's been births in the United States that have really driven that. And so as these trends continue, it's expected that in the United States, shortly after 2040, the United States will be predominantly people of color. And a decade prior to that, it's expected that the workforce will be majority people of color. And already, starting in the 15-16 school year, our US elementary and secondary schools became majority students of color. And I think, I don't want to get the number wrong, but I think, Chet, you shared with me that roughly 30% of your K-12 school population is Hispanic, Latino, and Pacific Islander? Roughly a quarter? Okay. So it sounds like y'all have seen some similar trends happening here. So this slide kind of shows what some of the everyday context is of what this growing diversity means for our community. And I wish that I had these numbers here for your area, and I'm sorry that I don't. But you can see how this is affecting our schools, the diversity within our schools. I'm sure Dr. Rollins spoke to that. You can also see the economic contributions that the immigrant community has brought to our area. And that really just here in a few years, we expect to be nearly 20% Hispanic Latino in Northwest Arkansas. So it's clear that we live in a diverse region, and I've been throwing around these terms. And so I just want to lay it out there in terms of how we see diversity, equity, and inclusion and how we're defining those. So when we're talking about diversity, we're really just talking about all of the ways in which we're different. So this can be primary characteristics like our age, our race, gender, ethnicity, mental and physical abilities. It can also be secondary characteristics like your education, income, religion, work experience, language skills, geographic location, and family status. Now, when we take it one step further and we talk about inclusion, this inclusion exists when traditionally marginalized individuals or groups feel a sense of belonging and are empowered to participate in majority culture as full and valued members of the community and are able to shape and redefine culture in different ways. When we talk about equity, we're really considering the socio-historical experiences that have created disparities between groups and really focuses on ensuring everyone has equal opportunity to be able to achieve the same outcomes. And I just want to note that equity is not the same as equality. Sometimes those two can be confused. Equality is treating everyone the same, but sometimes when you treat everyone the same, that can work against equity. So it's really understanding the difference between these three categories that is helping us achieve success. So when you practice those three concepts, here's just an example of what that can look like. In our business world, we see that gender diverse and ethnically and culturally diverse teams are 21% and 33% more likely to outperform their peers. That's according to McKinsey & Company. So I want to go and talk a little bit more about our strategic plan, the process and what we learned in that process and some of the challenges that we identified. When we really go beyond diversity and when we're really looking at creating a more inclusive and equitable region. So I think I mentioned this before, but what we really focused on in this process is what are the shared goals that we have across sectors and how can we leverage one another's strengths to address those goals. So we took an entire year to put together the strategic plan. It's a 4-year plan, and we convened cross-sector meetings. We also did small group and one-on-one interviews. So we had input from close to 200 stakeholders to put together the plan. And through the process, we learned about some common challenges that our region faces. So I want to highlight those challenges here. One of them is really this need to be able to attract, grow, and retain the workforce that we need for our region to continue to be successful. So currently, I know this number fluctuates a little bit, but right now we have roughly 14,000 available jobs in our region today. And although we are intently focused on growing our own in the region and helping to build those career pathways, the other piece is we need to be able to attract and retain talent from no matter where people are coming from, whether they're coming from Indonesia or China or whether they're coming from Chicago or Oklahoma City. We want everyone, when they come to our region, to feel at home and like they belong. The next one is we really were looking at leadership. You know, our leadership in all sectors is pretty homogenous at this point. So we really focused on how can leadership at all sectors and also all levels be more closely aligned with the demographics of our community. An example of that, so I mentioned to you all that in the 15-16 school year in the United States, in our K through 12 schools, that became majority students of color. Well, if you look at our teacher population, I don't have these numbers specific to Northwest Arkansas right now, but I'm looking at the US nationally, only 20% of our teachers are teachers of color. So so that's one thing that we would like to see that more closely mirror the demographics of our community. We also feel that everyone who's living in our area needs to be able to understand our local systems, how to access services, that they need to be able to fully participate at work, at home, and in the community. So I think Chet gave a great example of our partnership with Canopy NWA, which is a refugee resettlement organization, but they've really, in more recent years, have expanded to really help with integration of other immigrants in our community. And they did a series of community orientation classes that really focused on some of the top needs that newcomers have in our community. So that might be how to help your child succeed in school is one example of that. Help with your taxes is another. Getting to know your local government and how to be involved and understand your local government. And this was also in partnership with Tyson Foods. And so what Canopy actually did was go inside the plant to recruit hourly workers for these programs. And in some cases, the programs are held within the plant themselves through a program that Tyson has. But that was just one way to outreach to that newcomer population. The fourth is we need to be intentional about increasing understanding of one another and communicating across our differences. And I think this is also something that Chet mentioned. And this is where we partnered with our university's Office for Diversity and Inclusion to provide some training for our community. So we started out with some introductory workshops on bias and understanding unconscious and implicit bias and how that affects us and how we're actually all biased, and it's just kind of being able to recognize that and understand what that means and how that affects our decision making. So we engaged people across the region in that training and across sectors. So all of these things that I've mentioned, we recognize require greater partnerships and collaboration, and that's a big piece of what we're trying to do with Engage. And I think that it was really through this strategic planning process where we all sat down and said, you know, first of all, what's important to us? What do we want this community to be? And how do we achieve that together? And I think really being able to uncover what those shared goals are really helped develop new and innovative partnerships that didn't exist before that. So I'll share a few examples of locally what we saw some of those partnerships were. One of the most recent ones is that the City of Rogers and the Rogers-Lowell Area Chamber of Commerce partnered to hire a VP for community engagement, I think is his title, but it's really focused on diversity and inclusion efforts within Rogers. And the fact that the city and the chamber were able to both, you know, contribute toward being able to hire this person is significant, and it's really exciting that they could, again, it's, you know, going back to those shared goals that they have and being able to partner together on that. Another one is our university just hired an Ideals Institute, which is really going to be able to provide more training to our community around diversity and inclusion. I already mentioned the racial equity workshops. I think another one that I'll mention is just recently there was a US Senate resolution that recognized the importance of the Marshallese community and expands its access to public benefits. But that was really a push behind the Springdale Chamber, the Marshall Islands ambassador, and likely other partners, but that came together and said this is important and this is something that we need to do. And just recently our governor, I'm not sure if they've done this in Missouri, although I wouldn't be surprised, but our governor just launched a statewide complete count census committee recognizing the importance of getting an accurate 2020 US Census count. So those are just a few examples. So we're really beginning to see, and this is what we need for long-term success, that these efforts are really embedded within the culture of the organizations in our community. And we're increasingly seeing that happen, and this is really part of our long-term goal. We want to be able to keep the momentum going and particularly be a support for those who are just getting started in the work. So here's some of the ways in which we're doing that. I mentioned the shared values piece. We're looking at collecting and analyzing data to really get a sense for what's at stake for our community in this work. The practical engagement piece, providing opportunities and insights to support people doing the work. So I mentioned some of that training that's happening. We've had other convenings to kind of bring people together. We're trying to make our website more friendly and accessible and make that, and just our social media, so that people, if they need some ideas about how to start an initiative within their company or organization, they've got some place to go to help them get started. And then of course we have to look at our results. So we really want to be able to see the fruit of this work, why we're doing it, and ultimately why it's worth it. And I think for me, at the end of the day, I really try to remind myself that we're all part of this journey together in Northwest Arkansas, and we're all learning together, we're all going through the process together, and it really takes collaboration for us to be able to grow together and have success, and none of us are doing this alone. There's always other people who can help support you through the process. So that's been helpful to remember that, because it's not easy. It's definitely has its challenges and its difficulties. And again, it's just nobody necessarily has it all figured out, but we're all learning together through the process and trying to support one another. So some opportunities that we have for people to get involved with the work are listed here. So we try to have quarterly convenings that are based on different topics. So, you know, one quarter it might be some kind of a training, like we recently held a training for our K through 12 schools. Or it might be something specifically focused on the census, how you can help with outreach or making sure that our community is counted in the census. We really want that to be shaped and directed by our network. So we don't have a membership per se, but we have a network of individuals who are part of the work. But we also want to be able to hear from people, what are you working on, but also really what are you struggling with and what have you accomplished? It's helpful to, when you are having a challenging situation, to know that there's others who are also going through that, and then there's some ways that you can learn from your peers and others in your community about what's working and what's not working. And I think I mentioned this before, try to have tips, tools, and local insights on our social media, and then we do a monthly newsletter to try to keep people up to date on everything that's happening. And all of that's accessible through our website, engageinwa.org, so you're welcome to check that out. And I think it all comes back to recognizing those shared goals and then acting on them. So I think that's actually all that I have. I don't talk for very long. I hope that wasn't too long. But I welcome any questions, and then I would also just love to hear from you if we have some time, or Chet, if you have some ideas just in terms of what do you all see that's working well here? What ideas do you have in terms of partnerships that might help address some of these challenges that you have in your community? Or you can ask me questions about what I presented. Totally just wanted to open that up for either comments or questions.